Hello, my name is Carol Evans, and I'm publisher, editor, and owner of Birmingham Parent Magazine. I have been in the publishing business for the past 25 years or so. I graduated from Auburn University with a degree in print journalism in 1985 and did some miscellaneous work during that time, had a couple of children, and then in 2004, the beginning of 2004, we started Birmingham Parent Magazine, which was a monthly parenting magazine that's free in Central Alabama. Back in September of 2019, we went to bi-monthly, which, given the pandemic, has been a good choice. But during that time, since I am a business owner and we're a small business, we've used a lot of freelancers. We use a lot of freelance writers. And I've learned some things about working with freelance writers, and in talking with friends and folks in the business, we have come to some conclusions about some tips for being a successful freelance writer. So I wanted to share them with you today. I've given you some supplemental information that you can use, and basically everything I'm going to cover is in the file that says tips for writing for a parenting publication. Now, obviously, I know about writing for a parenting publication because that's what I do. But I think you can find a lot of these principles apply to other types of writing, whether it's newspapers, lifestyle magazines, niche magazines, whatever the case may be. Some of the same principles will apply for you. I was recently asked to put together something like this for a Christian writers conference, so there may be some references to that I left in there on purpose. So just know that's how that started out. What are some tips for trying to send out a query letter and write for another publication if you're going to do some freelance writing? Be familiar, first of all. Be familiar with the publication you are writing for. Don't send stories that have recently run. The topic has recently run. That will show them right up front that you didn't do any research and that you are not familiar with their publication. And your research will help you to know the types of stories that they usually run and give you a better idea of what might be acceptable to them from you. You're going to want to request an editorial calendar. Sometimes you may find these online already. They may be in their media guides, and you might need to contact the publication and ask for an editorial calendar if they don't have one online. Search their website and find out, if you can, if they even use freelance writers. Some bigger publications may not, but for us at Birmingham Parent, since we are so small, it just makes sense for us to do that rather than employ several writers full-time. Now, one of the biggest things when you get ready to write that query letter, or query email probably nowadays, is to think about what you're going to lead with. Whatever you do, don't lead with yourself. Lead with your idea, the topic, what the story is going to be about. Editors are much more interested in the storyline than they are about what college you graduated from. There's a place and time for all of that stuff, but the lead is not it. Your subject line may be the most important part of your email, and that's basically what you're going to lead with. Give them a subject line that makes them intrigued by your story idea and makes them want to open your email. Editors are much more interested in the topic than they are your work history. Now, going back to the Christian Writers Conference I did this for, keep in mind that most publications, if you're writing in that genre, most publications are secular. And you can send them ideas, but just don't be overly religious with them unless it's a religious publication. You can write inspiring stories and still fit into a lot of niches. Holiday time may be a better time for some of these, but just keep that in mind. Be ahead of the curve. That's another great tip. Be ahead of the curve. And what I mean is find out how frequently they print and how frequently ahead they how far ahead they work. For example, there was a time when we were monthly and we worked about 2 months out, but now that we are bi-monthly, we work a little farther out. So you don't want to send them a story about back to school on July 15th, and you don't want to send them a story that's related to Christmas in the middle of November. Most publications work at least 2 or 3 months out. So keep in mind that before you send your query, so you'll have better luck. They'll open your emails and you'll have better luck at snagging some opportunities that way. A lot of times, again, publications may have writer's guidelines on their website. If not, you're going to want to request them, and that will give you a lot of information like we're discussing. When you approach them, be clear if what you're offering to them is a brand new story you plan to write just for them, or it's a reprint. Reprints are often really more welcome to an editor because they're already written and they can spend less on them. So if you can share something about the reprint and that it's already done, that's a great thing to let the editor know. If the story's already written, you may want to include it or at least an excerpt from it. There's a lot of questions about people, who may take your stories and go with them, and have somebody else on staff do it or whatever and take your ideas. If you send something like that, you're going to want to copy yourself on your email so you have a record of that, a history of that. But you might just send an excerpt, enough that they can see what the story is about and the kind of the tone and the flavor, and then go from there. But let them know what kind of rights you're trying to sell. Tell the editor if you offer exclusivity in their market. For me, we're in the Central Alabama, Birmingham market, and I don't mind if I see the same story run in a Florida magazine or a Georgia magazine, but I sure don't want to see my competitor run the same story that we're running in the same month, and that has happened to us once, and I was not happy. It just is not a good business practice. So let them know if you're offering exclusivity. And if you need to, you can ask them who their competitors are or what kind of mileage range they operate within. But ask those questions and offer exclusivity because nobody wants to share with a competitor. Let's see. If you have the opportunity to include a photo or any type of art, that is really welcome. I'm sorry, I've got a cat after me here. That is really welcome. It's not always necessary. If you have a real specific story topic about a person, a character, a person, then yes, you may need to provide the art for sure. But if it's something real generic that stock art would work for, it's not as big a deal, but art is always a positive thing to include. If you do, be sure that you own the rights to the art or that it's royalty-free art from a website that does not charge for the art. By the way, please forgive me. I'm working from a home office and I've got a cat that's all over me here right now. So I'm trying to fight with him and deliver my message to you. The hazards of working at home. Let's see. Let's go on to the next page. Here's an important point. Realize that when you send a query letter that you're not necessarily going to either get a response or get a quick response. If you hit a thought that somebody really likes, you may, but for the most part, you probably won't. We have a small publication in Central Alabama, and I probably get more than 200 emails a day, and I have to weed through all of that. So I'm looking at the subject line, I'm hitting delete a lot, and trying to decide what is important and what is not. In fact, today I keep a file folder on my email of possible story ideas that come to me that are appealing to me but maybe don't work for that particular moment when I receive them. Today I sent something to a writer and said, hey, I'd like to use this in September, October, and she had originally sent it to me in 2018. So you just never know when you might hear back. Keep that in mind. But know that if you send a query you may not hear back, you can always send a little nudge or reminder, but I would highly recommend not stalking the editor. That's not going to go over real well, and it'll get you eliminated really quickly. You know, a reminder, a nudge is not so bad, but I wouldn't keep pushing. If you have a number of stories that you're interested in selling, you might even send a little catalog of your story ideas, or even the stories themselves if they're reprints, because sometimes that can be very appealing to an editor too. Like I said, you might not hear from the editor on some of those right away, but in a few months or even a year or so, you may hear from them again. Now here's a great point that we should all think of, but we don't always, and that's send clean copy. In the world of spell check, there's really no reason not to do that. Spell check is important. Now I realize spell check doesn't catch everything, but you want to send clean copy because that sets a precedent of what you're going to be like to work with, and how professional you are, and how committed you are to what you're doing. So be sure to send clean copy, and be sure to send it to hopefully the right person. Find out who that person is that it needs to go to at a particular publication. Again, your subject line is going to be one of the most important parts of your query, and be sure you've done something that really highlights what your story is about, or is something attention-grabbing, like a headline might be. When I was in school, headlines were always my weakness to write them, but it's something we've got to learn to do, and writing a query letter and a subject line is very much like that. Even ask a friend or an associate to help you if you're stumped. Here's another big thing that should be obvious. Deadlines are important, and don't miss them. If they give you a deadline, you need to meet it or come in earlier than the deadline. Now, I realize sometimes you may have to interview someone that may be difficult or something like that, or let's say you have a storm that wipes out all your power or your internet or whatever. But try to be in touch with your editor if there's something unusual like that that is going to cause you to miss your deadline, and let them know that you've got this conflict and that you're doing your best to get it in as soon as possible. But people who miss deadlines are not going to have jobs for very long. Don't write stories off the top of your head unless it's some sort of essay or poetry type magazine or publication. People don't want to hear as much first person unless you're an expert in something, or you're a humorist or something in that respect. Don't send a story that needs to be based on expert comments in essay style without attribution. You really need to have attribution, and this is personally one of my big pet peeves. Generally, websites and web information are considered secondary sources. If you're writing a story just from a website, I personally will not buy it, and a lot of other editors will not either. Be consistent with your style. When in doubt, you can defer to Associated Press style, but whatever you do in your story, be consistent with the style that you're writing in, so that it looks like you understand how that works. If you happen to know a publication uses a particular style, you can gain a lot of brownie points by writing in that style to begin with. Be clear what the publication is going to get from you and what you're seeking to sell, what they're buying from you. Ask for their terms, what they pay, when they pay, and what rights they are buying. That's really, really important. And if you're not familiar with that sort of thing, I put a website down at the bottom of this page about what rights are you selling, and you need to familiarize yourself with it if you're going to do freelance writing or really any type of writing. A lot of companies will use a contract, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, that can be very positive for you. They may ask you things like that you have really talked to your sources, or that you own the rights to art that you sent in, or photos, that sort of thing. But a contract can be very positive for both parties. If you have other publications in your area that you're interested in writing for, don't isolate yourself as a freelance writer. That's something that can happen if you're primarily doing freelance, and networking is your friend. You want people to know your name. You want them to know where you've been published, and take networking opportunities and the chance to meet and know other writers, because that can lead to work. And that's a really important thing. If you're looking for a full-time job, that can help you get there, because we all know sometimes it's who you know that helps you get your foot in the door. So be sure you take an opportunity to do networking opportunities. At the bottom of this, I have left you some links for freelance writing. Now, obviously it's for parenting publications, but there's still a lot of good information for any type of publication you may want to write for. Also in your packet of information that I shared are some sample query letters. The first two query letters are what I consider really good ones. They stand out. They would make me want to talk to that writer about that particular story. One is about working at home, and the other one is about bullying. And both of them did a great job by cutting to the chase immediately in what they sent me. The third letter I want to draw your attention to, it's query number 3. I kind of made this one up to show you what a bad query letter is. However, I have gotten them like this before, or at least some sort of compilation of them. Dear Carol, for many years my friends have told me I should be a writer. I'm pretty good at it. I'd like to write for Birmingham Parent. You can give me an assignment and I'll put something together for you right away. Looking forward to seeing my name in print. And then there's bad punctuation or no punctuation there. Oh, I included my resume. I currently work in an office, but I do have a college degree. That's a horrible letter. It doesn't tell me anything about what they want to write. It's all about the writer. And he's basically telling me he's not even an established writer, that he's not technically qualified, that he's a wannabe. And then he's telling me he's sloppy because he didn't punctuate it properly. So that's an example of a bad one. So take a look at those 3 letters and see if you can glean any ideas or information from those. And I want to tell you, thank you for taking time to listen to me during this whole talk. I hope it's helpful. And I did put my email address up at the top of the first document, and you're welcome to email me if you have any questions. I wish you lots of luck. We need good reporters and writers more than ever. Good luck, and thank you for listening.